It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Hello, this is Dr. Justin Coulson, the founder of happyfamilies.com.au, as we wind our way into term one of 2023. I love the conversations that I get to have as a result of the podcast. A little while ago, I came across a book by Gabbie Stroud. The book is called Dear Teacher. And while confession time, I haven't actually read the whole book, I was so enamored by the excerpt that I saw that I dived into that, and then I looked Gabbie up and listened to a podcast or two, and I saw her in an interview or two, and I thought, oh my goodness, parents and teachers need to know who Gabbie Stroud is. I'm sure that more of you know who Gabbie is than don't, but Gabbie joins me on the Happy Families podcast just now. Gabbie is a former school teacher, an author who writes just beautifully, a mum of two kids, and Gabbie, thanks so much for being with me as we kick off term one of this year.
Thanks so much for having me. What a time it is.
So I think we're starting this year normally for the first time in 3 years. But I'm getting a lot of emails from people, and I'm sure you are too, who are sort of saying, oh, my kids are nervous about school, or my kids don't want to go to school, I'm dealing with school refusal. You've stood in the shoes of a parent and in the shoes of an educator. What sort of a conversation do we need to be having with our kids, with each other, with teachers as we kick off the year? How would you suggest we approach even this conversation that you and I are having right now?
Look, it's funny, the start of a normal school year, normal in inverted commas, I'm not sure we'll ever be back to what we knew normal to be. We've all been affected by the change in our planet recently and the way we relate to one another and the way we're thinking about the world. So, the thing I'd be going in for at this point in time, if I was talking to anyone, parents, teachers, even the kids returning to school, I feel as though we need to get our head in the game. It's about our mindset right now. How are we thinking about things as we go into this new year and into this school year?
So let me ask you then, what do you reckon? I mean, I talk to a lot of parents, but I don't talk to them about this topic specifically. And when you say that, I kind of think, what is a parent's mindset as the school year kicks off? It's obviously going to differ developmentally depending on whether your child's going into their first year of big school or whether they're in grade 9 and just dragging their knuckles as they walk out the door, or if they're in year 12 and thinking, oh my goodness, I've got like 3 terms to go. It's almost finished. So when you talk about getting into the mindset, especially after like a 6-week break or whatever it's been, what do you mean by that?
Well, one of the things I'd love parents to remember as we take our kids back to school is that they're going to meet teachers, they're going to be engaged with the school community, and we see that very much as a learning environment. But it's really important as parents that we remember we are the first and the lifelong educator of our child. So it's not drop the kids back at school, set and forget, oh, thank goodness we don't have them home kicking around under our feet for the school holidays anymore. It's very much a continuation of our role as their primary educator. Just by the very nature of that child being birthed from you, that child looks to you as their educator for forever. And so that's really important that we remember that as parents, as we drop our kids at the school gate. And I think too, it's important for teachers to remember that too. Teachers don't have to carry this whole big load of educating the class in front of them all on their own. It's a partnership. It's teachers and parents working together. And when we think like that, we get better results for everyone who's on that team that's behind that student that's going through that school experience.
So I'm thinking about this idea of parents being the number one educator, the lifelong educator of that child. And 2 thoughts are coming to my mind, and I want to share them both and see what your reaction is. The first one is this idea that we would outsource education is still a relatively modern invention. I mean, universal education in school across most of the world, except for some particularly privileged people a few centuries ago and even millennia ago. Well, there's always been an encouragement for education. It's only become universal, in the last, let's say, 150 years, late 1800s. Even in France, and they were kind of on top of the game. They were in the late 1700s, early 1800s. So it's a pretty new invention. And until that time, parents really did do all the education. So that's my first, I guess, reaction to what you're saying. We've adapted to it really quickly and become very comfortable with just saying, all right, kids, you go to school, the learning happens there. But as parents, we've got this huge task to do that lifelong education, which leads me to the second reaction that I have to what you've said, and that is, if we are the primary and the lifelong educators of our children, what are we teaching them? Like when I think about what we might do when the kids come home, what are we teaching them? Are we teaching them that life is about hustle and bustle? We need to hurry. That life is about filling our agenda, our calendar with heaps to do. That life is about taking, and I say this meaning to be generous in our best efforts to fill our children's lives with all of the great enrichment activities that we can. We have to take shortcuts in other areas, like getting fast food and eating it in the car 3 nights a week. And I know I'm kind of piling on the guilt. I'm not trying to do that. But I guess my question is, what are we teaching our kids? If we're outsourcing the reading, writing, arithmetic sort of stuff to the schools, what are we teaching? Are we having conversations about sex, consent, and staying safe, or about alcohol and drugs? Are we talking to them about these things? I don't know. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, look, as a parent, we're teaching our kids all the time. Even those teenagers who are acting as though they don't care and they're not interested in us, they are looking at us sideways, the little side glance when they look up from their device. Our kids are absorbing us all the time like sponges. They're watching us. They're watching the way we speak to the kid at drive-through that serves us. They're watching the way we manage all that hustle. They're watching the way we plan and organize things. We, as the parents, we teach our kids so much about how to do life. Recently, through all that stuff with the pandemic, we taught them how we cope in a crisis. We are teaching our kids how to respond, how to be in the world, how to enact with the circumstances that come up with, around us. We teach them how to be in relationship to others. And I think that's why it's important to think about that as we send our kids back to school, because the way we as parents respond to that return to school or that going to school for the first time, we teach our kids some really particular mindsets about feelings about school. So if we ourselves had a pretty traumatic or a bad experience of school, we can really easily pass that trauma and that anxiety onto our kids.
Yeah, that would be me. And I've even said things, Gabbie, like, school feels like a prison. Like, my kids have heard me say that because that's how it felt to me. And you're right, the modelling that we exhibit, the teaching that we do without even realising it is profound.
Yeah, absolutely. How we talk about teachers, the kind of after school talk that we do around the playground as we let the kids have a last little play before we jump in the car at the end of the day at school pickup. The way we talk about teachers, the way we talk about things that are happening at the school, our kids pick up on that. They soak that up, and that can really imprint strongly on them about their feelings about school and their perception of school as well. So it's really important that as parents, we think about the mindset that we have, and that then what the kids are picking up from us as that kind of educator that we are, even though it's kind of like a sly education that we're giving, because they're just watching us, they're listening, and they're picking up our vibe.
Yeah, it's kind of like teaching by immersion and by osmosis. It just sort of settles on them. In fact, even when you use that word mindset, my definition of mindset is it's a settled way of viewing or thinking about things. It's just your attitude towards it. And it's a great reminder about what our mindset or what our attitude towards our kids and their education might be in order to best facilitate their success. I'm speaking with Gabbie Stroud. You can find more about Gabbie at gabbiestroud.com. What else do you think parents need to hear, Gabbie, when we're having this conversation?
Another big thing as we, recover from that first week back at school is to remember that we're all on the same team. So your child's teacher wants the exact same things for your child that you want for them. It's a really funny time for education. It's kind of trying to operate under a business model, and that's not really great. And what that has done is it's sort of positioned parents as though they're consumers and schools as though they're sort of a marketplace that's offering a particular product. And it's not really the best way for education to operate. And it sort of then positions parents to think that if something goes wrong, you go and have a complaint, you go in and say what went wrong, and you go and see the teacher and you get it all sorted out. And it then positions the teacher as though they're the owner of the shop and, you know, the customer's always right and we have to make an adjustment. We need to shift that mindset, you know, and we need to remember that the teacher really wants the exact same things that the parent wants. We want those kids to prosper. We want them to grow. We want them to achieve. We want them to fail and to learn from that failure. We want them to learn that achievement comes from effort. We want them to have a go. We want them to feel safe. We want them to socialize. We all want the exact same things. And so if we can kind of align ourselves with that and recognize that the teacher and the parent, we're all on the same team, we're all cheering for this kid to have success. If we can have that kind of mindset, and if we can have that, not even just a mindset, but to truly believe that, and to recognize that, it's actually going to grow a really lovely, healthy, productive relationship between teacher and parent. And that kind of healthy, productive relationship is only going to see that student thrive, which is ultimately what we all want.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like standing up and applauding. That was that was really, really powerful. The impact that not having a positive relationship with the teacher has on everything to do with schooling is profound. We've had that with one of our kids. We've got 6 kids. One of them, we had that one year, and we watched motivation, we watched well-being, we watched approach to school just suffer so very much as a result. So really, really nice idea. Is there anything else? Like if we were to give one more key takeaway for parents as they're settling into the new year and making all of this stuff happen, is there anything else that you think that we should talk about?
I think that I'd sort of like to leave your audience with the question, which is, what is school for? You know, why do we send our kids to school? It can't just be so that we go to work, because that's a pretty ordinary reason. And it can't, you know, that as an answer means that we just send our kids to school so our economy can keep going. And that's a very frail reason to put our kids through, you know, 10, 12 plus years of education.
I've got to jump in just for a sec on this, because I asked this question of a bunch of friends recently. We were standing around having a good catch up and we were talking about school, and some pretty negative attitudes came out about school as part of the conversation, which often is the case because school is not always positive for every kid. And they were talking about their own experiences and I was sharing mine and they were sharing their kids' experiences, and we were having that conversation. And I actually asked that question, what's the purpose of school? And I think there would have been 4, maybe 5 people in addition to me in that conversation. And I was met with blank stares. It's almost like, well, it's just what we do. It's part of the fabric of our society. We don't even notice it. It's just there, and it's what we do. And there was kind of just this vague, I'm not quite sure. Oh, well, we need it because that's how we get into university so that we can go and do what we really want to do with our lives. So that's how we've just got to do it because the government makes it compulsory. And as you've said, there's that economic aspect to it as well. Yeah. So when you hear that question, what's your answer? What is the purpose of school?
Well, I've thought about this question long and hard, and it's the same answer that you get when you don't think about it very much. Like, you send kids to school to learn. You know, to learn all the things, social skills, reading, writing and arithmetic, problem solving, cooperation, all those things, all of those things. But then if we send them to school to learn, then what is learning all about? This is a question that leads you down a little rabbit warren of other questions. What is learning about? Why do we learn? You know, and we learn because we're human, and so inherently we're curious, and we learn because through learning we can grow and we can achieve things, and we can contribute to our society because we live in society, we live in communities. Again, this is just because we're human. So when you really follow this thought along, you discover that learning is actually a really important thing. It's vital for our survival. And then it leads me into questions about So if learning is so vital and it's important for our survival and it's inherent within us because we're curious, is learning a competition? And do we send our kids to school to compete with one another? And if that is the case, then how do we determine winners and losers? And what happens to our learning when we feel as though we're the loser? And, I'm really just opening up a big can of worms for everyone that's listening. But I'd love for parents to think about that, because that is part of what I see as being a little bit of a problem in education at the moment, this business model and this idea of learning being a competition, and we're going to pit the kids against one another and say who learned that best and what school's performing best based on these tests. It's something we all need to think carefully about, because really, if learning is that important, then our schools should be the healthiest, most most thriving places in our communities, and our teachers should be the happiest people and the people who are so pleased to show up for their jobs every day, and our kids should be singing as they go out the door ready for a school day. And I'm not sure that always happens. And the only way it's going to change is if we all start thinking, well, what is school for? What is it about? Why do we do it?
Gabbie, I want to say the hard thing now, because I'm in love with what you've said. But the hard thing is, for too many of our kids and for too many of our teachers as well, school is not those things that you've just articulated. School is not fun. School is not a place of learning. School is not engaging. School is not a place where curiosity is fed and that light is lit, where we want to continue discovery. School is a place of pain and rote memorization and high levels of demands and feelings of incompetence and social isolation. And I'm just talking about the teachers here, right? I mean, no, I'm just kidding. It's that kind of process or that kind of experience for far too many of our kids. Now, we obviously can't solve the education challenges that this country has in a 15-minute podcast with Happy Families. But maybe if we, as we reflect on your three big ideas that we've just talked about, this idea of getting our mindset right, getting on the same team as the teacher, and really focusing on the learning and the discovery, the development of the child through an education process, can I ask a tricky question to wrap up? And that is, if the answer is no, that's not how it is for my child. If somebody's listening right now, or if there's a teacher who's saying that's not how it is for half the kids in my class, or that's not how it is for me, what do we do to, I guess, provide some hope, to offer a pathway forward for those people who are struggling from an education point of view, whether it's adults or kids?
This is the tricky question, and it is the hard one. But here's the thing, and it's going to sound simple, but it is complex. And this is not research. This is my instinct answer, and that is that learning is all about relationships.
Yes.
It is both as simple and as complex as that. And so if there's a teacher or a student out there that's listening and struggling with school, and that parent is feeling that student's pain, what needs to be remedied are relationships. And so it actually then is going to have to go back to conversations, mindsets, going in and talking to teachers and getting on the same team, teachers talking to students and bringing them in on the same team, but also bigger than that, those barbecue backyard conversations, those down the street conversations, those playground conversations where adults are talking with adults, parents with parents. We need to start really talking about what we want our schools to look like, and that's how we make our schools and design our schools so that all kids feel as though they're succeeding and that there's something there for them, and that all teachers feel as though they're thriving. And again, so that comes down to relationships and conversation, and it seems so basic and it seems so simple, but that's where it's got to be. That's where it's got to start. This change in education that's so needed is not going to come from a politician, but it's just not. It's going to be a grassroots movement, and that means it's us.
Gabbie Stroud, the author of Dear Parents, the author of Teacher. Find her at GabbieStroud.com. Wish we could talk for ages, Gabbie. This has been such a delightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We will link to Gabbie's resources in the show notes so that you can find more about her. And if you're an educator, you might like to have Gabbie show up at your school and talk with the staff or even the parents. She's just delightful and absolutely wonderful to listen to and engage with. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon for Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. For more information about making your family happier, please visit us at happyfamilies.com.au. Oh, and in a couple of weeks' time, we've got a webinar for you about what to do when school sucks, because the reality is for some kids it does, and we want to make that less of a problem. So please visit us at happyfamilies.com.au for that information.